Hey, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use references to create hands that are more stylized or exaggerated. So, in the previous videos, we've talked a lot about understanding the mechanics of the basic shapes for hands, and I'm not going to beat a dead horse on that. I definitely want you to check those videos out if you get a chance. But it boils down to looking at underlying shapes. And the first thing I do is I kind of create a study here. So we talk about long, medium, and short when we're looking at fingers. So in this particular case, we can see the long part, which originates from the palm, is somewhat visible. It's actually coming a little bit out towards us, like that. And then we have the medium, and then we have the short. And that short's going to have the nail on it. And then we can see that we have another long section. We have medium and short. It always is a good idea to draw through the form. So long, medium, and short. We can see that there is an arch on the palm, which I'm going to convey over here. And also extend the hands out a little bit. So this is like my first pass at, looking at the reference. And what I like to do when I'm drawing, say if I've got two hands that I'm working with, I will hide the first hand, create another layer. And in this case, looks like we have something like this. Got that trapezoidal shape. I will start with the thumb. And I'll work my way up, long, medium, and short. Here we see the medium and the short end. And here we see the long kind of extended out towards us. There's the knuckle, medium, and short. And then lastly, we've got the pinky, long, medium, and short. And we've got the knuckles here, and we've got the wrist. We got some skin. So now what I can do is I can just verify the reference one more time, just make sure that I'm not missing out on things like nails. I think that looks okay. And now I'm going to hide the reference. And the reference I obtained was from lineofaction.com. I'll go ahead and put a link to that in the description down below. They've got a lot of great models that not only hands, but you can also draw feet. You can draw clothed figured models. You can draw nude figure models. It's actually pretty cool. So I'll just kind of move this in a little bit closer and just like reposition it. Just make a little correction, and then I'm just going to merge the layers and drop the opacity. So If I'm going to now, say, make like, I don't know, like a witch's hand or some kind of a monster's hand, then we really want to play up the boniness of the fingers. So on a new layer, what I'll just do is I'll just kind of denote the knuckles, and I'm going in with, making the actual fingers less fleshy and just more emaciated. And I'm also going to take the nails and I'm just going to extend the nails out. I'll do the same thing over here. I also want to give a shout out to Brad Colbow. I will put a link to his awesome YouTube channel. Do check it out when you get a chance. He drew one of my characters from a webcomic that I used to create a long time ago, and it was super cool to see him take a stab at my character, and I love the way it came out. So do check that out. It's part of an iPad review, the latest iPad, the low-end model that just came out. So do check out Brad's review. Again, I will put a link to that in the description. Thank you, Brad, for the plug. All right, so that's the first hand. You can see that just by making, this look a little bit more naughty and just more angular, it's kind of giving it that creepy vibe. I'll do the same thing for the other thumb. Again, kind of making it a little bit more emaciated. Think about how the nail rests on the finger. I mean, very, very important to kind of look at your own hand and just see that the nail is literally on the top. If you look at the nail from a head-on view, right, the nail is at the top here, and then you've got the actual finger underneath. So definitely something to keep in mind. For giggles, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go back through, and I'm going to also give a little bonus tip on coloring. So I can hide my initial sketch. I've got a more revised sketch here, and I will drop the opacity on that. And this time I'm going to come back and ink. Now the brush that I'm using here is a square brush, and I've made a video on how to do that. And this brush is what I use for not only penciling, but I use the same brush for inking too. So if you're curious about what brush I'm using to go ahead and draw, you can make it. It's not something that I charge for. It's just, I think it's good to empower artists to be able to, make their own brushes. I made my own brushes only because I couldn't find brushes that replicated a feel that I was looking for. There are a lot of great artists that are selling their own brushes, and I have purchased many over the years. But the only challenge that I found myself running into, outside of just the feel of the brush not being exactly what I want, is that I want to be able to make this brush wherever I'm at. If I'm teaching on campus, or if I'm working on someone else's machine, I want to be able to have a go-to brush without having to, import an ABR file and do all that stuff. So that's why I came up with that square brush, which I really, really like. And you can dial it to taste. What I like about it is it gives me this nice thin to thick variance. And I'm going to go ahead and throw some warts and other fun stuff, because after all, this is some kind of a creepy hand. I'm not really a very precise inker. And what I mean by that is I use my pencils as a guide, and I generally just use the, I like to jam out when I ink. I'm not super precious. The only time I've really been precious with inks is if I'm inking somebody else's work. And if they've got very tight pencils, then I try to honor that and, put everything in. But when I work, unless I'm handing my pencils off to somebody else, I generally work very loose. So, because usually I'm inking my own work, so I kind of know what I want to do. I'm excited about the, speaking of the iPad earlier with Brad's review, I will be taking possession of an iPad mini, the latest version. I have used an iPad Pro in the past. My daughter now has that as her main computer, and she uses it for Procreate and all these other things. Initially that was my iPad, but the problem, and my iPad is a 2015 model. So it was good. I enjoyed using it, but it was just a little bit too big for me. And so I found it to be a little bit uncomfortable to actually draw with. So I just ended up giving it to her. And she's been putting it to good use with school and stuff. So I think the smaller mini size, now that it has the horsepower, I think it's going to be a pretty good contender. So I've got now my inks here, and I'm going to look at areas where I can, add some hatching. And what does hatching do? Hatching allows you to kind of give a little bit more texture to your drawing. And then you can also fill in areas that are ensconced in shadows with black fills. And so that's what I'm going to do over here, like this area right here. I'm going to kind of bathe that in some shadows. Adding some dark fills or black fills is a good way to kind of make your line art pop a little bit more. All right, so now that I've got that, we don't know who this creature actually is. Let me just make sure that I'm closing my gaps. And I will make a new layer, and I'll just wrap this around with a border. And so what I'm doing here is I'm using the Shift key, and I'm creating a border. And I will actually have these hands kind of extend out of the border. Like so. And I'm not really one to label my layers, usually because I end up creating lots and lots of layers. But I will try to label them for you. And what I'm doing here is I'm just making a Magic Wand tool selection. This is selecting everything outside of the hands. And I can fill that in with the True Grit Texture Supply texture. Whoops. This one's going to be a little bit unpredictable because I have it turned on with the script. Let me hit cancel. Try that again. Click OK. There we go. Alright, so we've got some dark values there. And then what I'll do is I will select everything else. So I can select the areas that are currently filled with blue, and I can make a new layer, and then I can inverse the selection, Shift Command I, and if I only want the hands to be selected, because Shift Command I is going to select this entire border, and I don't want the border to have the color, I only want the hands to have that color. So here's a new tip that I think might help you. If I go back to the rectangular selection tool with the selection active, I can hold down the Option key and I can simply get rid of the stuff that I don't want selected. So in this case, by holding down the Shift key, I am subtracting, or I'm sorry, the Option key, I'm subtracting from my selection. And so now it's only going to select the areas that I really care about. So what I can do now is I can go ahead and pick a green color. I can dial that in by adjusting the hue and saturation. And we'll zoom in so we can get a closer look. Got the nails. This will be my last hand video. I know that I've done a few of these now. I hope it's been helpful. But I'm on to doing different things with my next videos. And I'm curious to know what you actually want me to talk about. What are some topics that are piquing your curiosity? I can't promise that I will, be the right source for a lot of these things, but I will read every submission, and I do want to thank everyone who's been kind enough to go ahead and post comments on the videos. Thank you so much for doing that. Sometimes when you're making videos, it just seems like you're making them for you're hopefully making them from someone else, but I really don't know if anyone's actually, I didn't know if people were actually watching it or if they were enjoying the content. I'm holding down the lasso tool here, using the lasso tool, holding down the Shift key to add to my selections. And I'm just going to go from my base color layer where I've got this green, and then hit Command J to jump the selections onto their own layer. And I'm just going to make this a little bit dark. Then come back with my square brush. And so every area that's going to be, I have to kind of imply a light source. The light source is going to be coming up from above. And so that means that everything below will be darker. Yay, beach ball. And here you want to make sure your gaps are closed. If you draw with with gaps, in other words, if you don't fill in all of your inks, that's totally fine. There are ways that you can kind of work with that. In this particular case, since I don't know where the gap actually is, I'm using the polygon lasso tool, filling that in. And so I've got my shadows or my shading on a separate layer here. I'll just clean this up. And the last thing I want to do is I want to add some highlights. So what I'll do is I will go in with some kind of a yellow value. And I will expand the size of my brush as needed. And then what I'll do is I'll do a grayscale check. This is really important, and I talk about this in another video. When you do a grayscale check, you can see your values. What are values? Light, medium, and dark values. And in order to have good contrast, you want to have a wide tonal range. So I'm seeing some light values, some medium values, some dark values, and some really dark values. Like you've got black and the gradients that go all the way up to white. So I always do a grayscale check just to make sure that there's sufficient contrast. So I hope you found this video to be useful. Let me know what you think in the comments below. What are some topics you'd like me to talk about next? You know, I'm always looking for ideas. I've got some definite, options that I can choose from, but I'm also curious to know what you would like me to talk more about. So hit me up in the comments below for this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.